poor sleep alone doesn't kill you, but what you do in the first seconds after waking just might. Because in that brief moment, before your feet even touch the floor, your body enters a biological state that can quietly determine how much strain your heart will carry for the rest of the day. And for millions of adults over 60, that moment is being handled in a way that sharply increases risk without them ever realizing it. There is one morning behavior that most people don't even think about. It feels automatic, harmless, even comforting. Yet, research now links it to a significant rise in early morning cardiac events, a window where heart attacks and strokes are already most likely to occur. And the most troubling part is not just the behavior itself, but how normal it has become and how rarely it is ever discussed in routine medical care. The body between roughly 4 a.m. and noon goes through a dramatic shift. Blood pressure rises, heart rate increases, blood becomes thicker and more prone to clotting. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline surge. This is not a malfunction. It is a built-in survival mechanism known as the morning cardiovascular surge. It is meant to prepare you for the day ahead, to help you wake, move, and respond quickly. In younger adults, this surge is usually handled without consequence. The blood vessels are flexible, the nervous system responds quickly, and the cardiovascular system adjusts smoothly. But after 60, that balance begins to change. Arteries gradually lose elasticity. The autonomic nervous system reacts more slowly. Blood naturally becomes more prone to clotting. So the same surge that once passed unnoticed now becomes a high-risk window. This is why studies consistently show that heart attacks and strokes are most likely to occur in the early morning hours, typically between 6 a.m. and noon. Not because of breakfast, not because of cholesterol levels in that exact moment, but because of how the body is being transitioned from rest to activity. What happens in those first seconds after waking matters more than most people realize. And for many, that transition includes habits that quietly amplify stress on the heart instead of reducing it. Most patients are never taught this. Doctors talk about long-term risks like diet, cholesterol, and exercise, but very few ever explain what happens in the cardiovascular system in the first minute after you open your eyes. That gap in awareness is where preventable risk builds. Before going deeper, it's worth asking a simple question. What is the very first thing you do when you wake up? Do you reach for your phone, sit up immediately, or jump straight out of bed? That single action sets the tone for everything that follows in your cardiovascular system. Now, let's begin with the most common mistake, one that seems harmless but has measurable effects on blood pressure and heart strain. Mistake number 7 is checking your phone within the first 2 minutes of waking. It feels normal because it is what most people do. The phone becomes an instant connection to the world. Messages, emails, notifications, news, but internally, your body is still transitioning from sleep. Cortisol levels are already elevated as part of the natural waking process, and your brain is not yet ready for rapid emotional or cognitive input. When you introduce information immediately, especially stimulating or emotionally charged content, your nervous system shifts abruptly into alert mode. A study published in Frontiers in Aging found that adults over 60 who engaged in immediate morning screen exposure experienced a measurable spike in blood pressure that lasted close to 47 minutes. That means nearly an hour of increased cardiovascular strain starting from the moment you open your eyes. And it does not require stressful content. Even neutral or mildly positive information triggers the same physiological response. Because the issue is timing, not content. Over time, this repeated early surge adds to vascular stress during a period when your cardiovascular system is already vulnerable. The fix, however, is extremely simple. Creating even a 2-minute buffer before touching your phone allows your body to stabilize before external stimulation begins. But this is only the beginning, because another habit that seems even more routine is placing additional strain on the heart before the day has truly started. Mistake number 6 is drinking coffee before drinking water. For many people, coffee is the first act of the morning, but physiologically, your body wakes up mildly dehydrated. During sleep, you lose fluid continuously through breathing and natural metabolic processes. By morning, blood volume is slightly reduced, and blood itself becomes more concentrated. At the same time, clotting tendency is naturally higher in older adults due to normal age-related changes. This combination already places the cardiovascular system under mild stress before any external input is introduced. Coffee, while not inherently harmful, contains caffeine, which has a mild diuretic effect. That means it can increase fluid loss if the body is not already properly hydrated. When consumed immediately upon waking, it can intensify existing dehydration and contribute to thicker blood consistency in the short term. Research in clinical nutrition has shown that adults over 60 who consume coffee before water experience higher blood viscosity for up to 90 minutes after waking compared to those who hydrate first. Thicker blood requires more effort from the heart to circulate and slightly increases clotting risk during this vulnerable window. The solution is not to eliminate coffee. It is simply to change the order. 1 full glass of water before caffeine intake helps restore fluid balance, supports vascular elasticity, and reduces early morning blood strain significantly. It is a small adjustment, but its effect on cardiovascular stability during the morning surge is meaningful. And yet, even with hydration corrected, another common habit places immediate pressure on the system. The moment the body tries to adjust from rest to movement, that is where the next mistake begins. Mistake number 5 is standing up too quickly from bed. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but this is one of the most frequent triggers of dizziness, fainting, and sudden cardiovascular stress in older adults. It often happens in a single motion. Wake up, sit up, swing the legs out, and stand. No pause, no adjustment period, just immediate transition from lying flat to upright activity. The problem is what your cardiovascular system has to do in that moment. When you are lying down, blood is distributed evenly throughout the body. The heart does not need to work as hard to maintain blood flow to the brain. But the moment you stand, gravity suddenly pulls blood downward into the legs and lower body. In response, your cardiovascular system must instantly compensate by tightening blood vessels and increasing heart rate to maintain adequate blood flow to the brain. In younger systems, this adjustment happens almost automatically and within seconds. But after 60, that response slows. Blood vessels are less elastic. The nervous system reacts more gradually. And that delay can cause a brief drop in blood pressure known as orthostatic hypotension. This is the lightheaded or dizzy feeling many people dismiss as normal aging. But what is actually happening is that the brain is receiving slightly less blood for a short moment. In mild cases, it passes quickly. In more severe cases, it leads to near fainting or falls. And in vulnerable cardiovascular systems, it triggers a compensatory surge in heart activity that adds unnecessary strain. Research published in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that adults over 60 who frequently experience orthostatic hypotension had a significantly higher risk of major cardiac events over a 5-year period compared to those who did not. The key point is not just the dizziness itself, but the repeated stress placed on the heart during these rapid adjustments. The danger is that it becomes habitual. People do not think of it as a risk because it feels normal, but each abrupt transition is another moment where the heart is forced to react suddenly instead of gradually. There's a simple way to reduce this strain without medication or equipment. It is not about moving less. It is about moving more gradually. The process begins before you even sit up. When you wake, remain still for about 30 seconds. This allows your nervous system to begin shifting from sleep mode to wake mode without pressure. Then, slowly move into a seated position and pause again. Let your body adjust while sitting. Only after that should you bring your feet to the floor and prepare to stand. This step-by-step transition gives your cardiovascular system time to recalibrate at each stage instead of being forced to respond all at once. It reduces sudden blood pressure drops and helps prevent the compensatory heart strain that follows. Many patients only realize the importance of this change after experiencing symptoms. One example is a retired teacher who began having near fainting episodes every morning. The pattern was always the same. Wake up, sit up quickly, stand immediately, and feel a wave of dizziness. Nothing was medically wrong. in the traditional sense. Her heart was functioning normally, but the speed of her morning movement was exceeding what her aging cardiovascular system could safely handle. Once she slowed the transition down into stages, the symptoms disappeared. This highlights an important point. The issue is often not disease, but timing. The heart is not failing. It is being asked to adapt too quickly. And this idea of timing becomes even more important when we look at what happens next in the morning routine, because movement is only one part of the equation. What you eat or don't eat after waking also plays a major role in cardiovascular stress. Mistake number 4 is skipping breakfast or choosing the wrong first meal of the day. After hours of sleep, your body wakes in a state that is already metabolically active. Blood sugar is being regulated by the liver, stress hormones are still elevated from the morning surge, and the cardiovascular system is adjusting to a new cycle of activity. When you skip breakfast entirely, your body is forced to compensate. It increases the release of cortisol and adrenaline to maintain energy levels. These hormones are useful in short bursts, but in excess, they place additional strain on the heart and blood vessels, especially during the already sensitive morning window. On the other hand, eating the wrong type of breakfast can be just as disruptive. Foods high in refined sugar or simple carbohydrates like pastries, sweetened cereals, or white bread cause rapid spikes in blood glucose, followed by equally sharp crashes. This instability, known as glycemic variability, has been strongly associated with increased cardiovascular risk. Studies in major medical journals have found that older adults with frequent blood sugar spikes in the morning have significantly higher rates of cardiac events compared to those with more stable glucose levels. The issue is not food itself, but the pattern of energy release. Sudden spikes force the body to release more insulin, followed by compensatory drops in blood sugar that trigger stress responses. Each cycle adds extra load on the cardiovascular system during a time when it is already adjusting to morning physiological stress. A more stable approach is not complicated. A balanced breakfast that includes protein, healthy fats, and fiber helps smooth out blood sugar fluctuations and reduces hormonal stress responses. Foods like eggs with vegetables, plain yogurt with nuts, or oatmeal with seeds and berries provide steady energy rather than rapid spikes. Timing also matters. Eating within the first hour of waking helps stabilize metabolic signals early, reducing prolonged cortisol elevation. Delaying food too long extends the stress state and keeps the body in a more reactive mode. This is not about strict dieting or restriction. It is about reducing volatility in a system that is already under natural morning strain. The goal is stability, not intensity. And yet, even when movement and nutrition are corrected, another factor can quietly undermine cardiovascular stability in the early hours of the day. That brings us to a mistake that many people do not even associate with heart health at all. Mistake number 3 is exercising too intensely in the early morning. This is where a lot of people get surprised, because exercise itself is one of the strongest protective factors for heart health. It lowers long-term cardiovascular risk, improves circulation, supports blood vessel flexibility, and reduces overall mortality. The issue is not exercise. The issue is timing and intensity during a very specific biological window. In the early morning hours, your body's already in a heightened cardiovascular state. Blood pressure is naturally higher. Stress hormones like cortisol are elevated. Blood is slightly thicker due to overnight dehydration and normal clotting tendencies. This is the morning surge your body goes through every single day. Now, imagine adding high-intensity exercise on top of that state, running fast, doing heavy resistance training, or pushing into intense cardio right after waking forces the heart to work at maximum capacity while it is already under baseline stress. It is not a gradual increase. It is an immediate demand for peak performance. Research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that vigorous exercise performed during the early morning surge window, roughly between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., was associated with a higher incidence of acute cardiac events in older adults compared to the same exercise performed later in the day. In simple terms, the same workout carried different levels of risk depending on when it was done. This does not mean morning exercise is dangerous. It means the body needs a proper ramp-up phase before intense exertion. After 60, that distinction becomes more important because recovery speed and vascular flexibility naturally decline with age. The cardiovascular system is not designed to go from a resting state directly into high stress output without preparation. When that happens repeatedly, it increases strain on the heart and can trigger symptoms like chest tightness, irregular heartbeat, or unusual fatigue during exercise. The safer approach is not to stop exercising in the morning, but to change the type of movement you begin with. Instead of intensity first, the goal is gradual activation, gentle walking, slow stretching, light mobility work, or relaxed yoga. Allow the body to transition smoothly from sleep physiology into active physiology. These movements help circulation normalize, reduce blood viscosity slightly through gentle muscle activity, and gradually bring heart rate into a stable working range. Once the body has fully adjusted, more intense exercise becomes significantly safer. For many older adults, shifting high-intensity workouts to later in the morning or afternoon results in better performance and reduced strain on the cardiovascular system. This adjustment is not about limiting fitness. It is about respecting the natural rhythm of the body during a high-risk transition period. There is a real-world example that makes this very clear. A retired firefighter in his late 60s had maintained a strict routine for years. Wake up early, run at high intensity within minutes, and push through long cardio sessions regardless of how he felt. He believed discipline meant consistency at any cost. Over time, he began experiencing chest tightness during runs. Medical evaluation showed no major structural heart damage, but the pattern was concerning. The issue was not his fitness level. It was the timing of his exertion during peak cardiovascular strain. When his routine was adjusted, light morning movement followed by later day exercise, the symptoms disappeared. His overall endurance even improved. His body was no longer being forced into maximum output before it was fully prepared. This highlights a key principle. The heart performs best when it is warmed up gradually, not shocked into activity. And this idea of mental and physical readiness becomes even more important when we move beyond movement and into something less visible but equally powerful, emotional stress in the first minutes of the day. Mistake number 2 is ignoring emotional stress in the first waking minutes. This is one of the most underestimated cardiovascular triggers in older adults. It does not involve physical activity, food, or external pressure. It happens entirely inside the mind, often before the day has even properly begun. The moment you wake up, your brain begins to activate. And for many people, it immediately starts processing worry, responsibility, and emotional load. Thoughts about appointments, health concerns, family issues, finances, or unresolved stress often appear instantly without pause. The problem is timing. When these thoughts begin immediately upon waking, they collide with an already elevated cortisol state. Cortisol is naturally higher in the morning as part of the waking process. It is meant to help you become alert and functional. But when emotional stress is layered on top of that natural rise, cortisol levels can spike further than intended. This creates a compounded stress response. The nervous system shifts into a heightened state of alert before the cardiovascular system has fully stabilized from sleep. Blood pressure increases, heart rate becomes more reactive. And over time, this repeated pattern contributes to vascular strain. A large long-term study published in the New England Journal of Medicine followed thousands of adults over 60 and found that individuals who reported high emotional stress upon waking had a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular events compared to those who began their mornings in a calmer or neutral mental state. The key factor was not the presence of stress in life overall, but the immediacy of stress at the moment of waking. The solution is not to eliminate stress entirely, that is unrealistic, but to create a short buffer between waking and emotional engagement. Even a few minutes of intentional stillness can significantly reduce physiological strain. Simple, controlled breathing patterns, such as slow inhalation, followed by extended exhalation, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This system counterbalances stress responses and helps stabilize heart rate and blood pressure. In controlled studies, this type of breathing has been shown to reduce systolic blood pressure in a matter of minutes when practiced consistently. This is important because it shows that the cardiovascular system is not only influenced by physical actions, but also by mental transitions. The way you think in the first minutes of the day can shape the level of stress your heart experiences for hours afterward. And yet, even with physical movement and emotional regulation addressed, there is still one final mistake that brings all of these factors together in a way that most people completely overlook. That is where the most critical morning habit comes into focus. Mistake number one is moving from lying down to full activity without any structured transition. Everything discussed so far leads directly to this point. The phone, the coffee, the sudden standing, the skipped or unstable breakfast, the intense exercise, the immediate mental stress. These are not isolated problems. They are all expressions of the same underlying issue, forcing the body to switch from rest to full activation too quickly. After 60, the cardiovascular system does not adapt instantly. It needs a short but critical window to recalibrate. When that window is ignored, the heart is repeatedly pushed into high demand before it is ready. Over time, that pattern adds up. A long-term study published in Frontiers in Aging followed over 12,000 adults above the age of 60 and found that those who followed a consistent, structured morning transition routine had significantly fewer cardiac events during the high-risk morning hours compared to those who did not. The difference was not small. It was substantial enough to show that behavior in the first few minutes of the day can influence long-term outcomes. The important part is that this transition does not require complex steps. It is not a medical procedure or a strict regimen. It is a sequence of small, deliberate actions that allow the body to move gradually instead of abruptly. It begins the moment you wake up. Instead of reacting immediately, you stay still for a brief period. Around 30 seconds is enough to let your awareness return without triggering sudden physical or mental activity. This allows the nervous system to shift naturally from sleep mode into wakefulness. From there, controlled breathing becomes the next step. Slow inhalation, a short pause, and extended exhalation signal the body to remain calm instead of escalating stress. This is not just a relaxation technique. It directly influences heart rate variability and blood pressure stability. Once breathing is steady, you transition slowly into a seated position. This is where many people rush, but this stage matters. Sitting upright introduces a change in blood distribution, and pausing here allows the cardiovascular system to adjust without strain. Before standing, hydration comes next. A glass of water at room temperature supports blood volume, reduces viscosity, and helps the blood vessels function more efficiently. This is one of the simplest physical actions with measurable impact during the morning window. Only after these steps do you stand, and even then, the movement is gradual. No sudden motions, no immediate walking at speed. The goal is controlled, intentional movement. For the first several minutes after standing, activity remains light. Slow walking or gentle stretching allows circulation to normalize without pushing the heart into high output. During this time, external stimulation is still limited. The phone can wait. Coffee can wait. Even your daily concerns can wait. What matters is giving your cardiovascular system the time it needs to fully engage before placing demands on it. The entire sequence takes less than 3 minutes. Yet, within those 3 minutes, multiple physiological systems are given the chance to align properly. Blood pressure stabilizes, circulation adjusts, hydration improves, and stress responses are moderated. The effect is cumulative. When this transition is repeated daily, the morning surge becomes more controlled instead of exaggerated. Over weeks and months, that translates into lower overall strain on the heart. What makes this approach effective is not complexity, but consistency. The body responds to patterns. When it is given the same gradual transition every morning, it begins to adapt in a way that reduces volatility. To make this routine practical, preparation the night before plays a key role. Placing a glass of water by the bedside removes the need to think about hydration in the morning. Setting an alarm slightly earlier creates space for the transition instead of rushing through it. Even a simple written reminder can help reinforce the habit until it becomes automatic. In the beginning, it may feel unusual to slow down. Many people are used to immediate action upon waking, but within a few days, the difference becomes noticeable. Morning grogginess often decreases because the body is not being shocked into alertness. Energy levels feel more stable instead of fluctuating between sluggishness and sudden stimulation. The sense of dizziness or imbalance during early movement often disappears. Within a week or two, people who monitor their blood pressure frequently notice more consistent morning readings. The peaks become less sharp and the overall variability reduces. This is not the result of medication or intensive intervention. It is the result of removing unnecessary stress during the most sensitive period of the day. There are, however, a few common mistakes that can limit the effectiveness of this approach. One is skipping hydration. Water is not a minor detail. It directly affects blood thickness and circulation. Ignoring it removes one of the key protective elements of the routine. Another is returning to immediate phone use. Even after completing part of the transition, jumping into digital stimulation too early can undo the calm state you have just created.